Hello, hello, and welcome, beautiful souls. I am Julie Paul. I'm here with my dear colleague, Bill Amirault, and I'm very excited that we're here today. We're actually kicking off the first episode of what I hope to be a long series on the theme, the topic of career and spirituality. And we're gonna investigate with Bill, who is a faith-based career development coach. We're going to investigate what it means to be aligned and express who we are and embody our soul purpose at work. We're going to investigate that together. And Bill will give us ample, examples and advice about how to move forward towards more alignment in our career. So Bill, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very excited.
Oh, yeah, you're quite welcome. And it was refreshing to hear my name pronounced properly in French. I'm in the US and my name is Bill Amirault in English, but when my father came over from Nova Scotia, that's how they pronounced it, Amirault, like you did. So thanks for that.
Yeah, great. For once, I couldn't get it wrong. So that's just perfect. And I hope everyone is okay with the accent, because I cannot turn it down. This is not possible. So bear with me. Awesome, Bill. So Bill, you're a career development coach. You're also a leadership coach. And so I'm not going to introduce you too much, because you're going to tell us a lot about your own career. And what I like to start with is always first asking, what is actually your perspective of spirituality? How do you see spirituality? What does it mean to you? And then how did you come about becoming a career development coach, and how does spirituality has had a role in your whole career journey?
Yeah, I can answer actually all three of those in one answer.
Okay.
And it's the mantra that I use when I'm working with any client, and it goes something like this. I believe from the bottom of my being that God put us all here for a variety of reasons. Career is one of the most important. So it's up to us to define and manifest those reasons in the best way that we can, at whatever time that means. You may have 5 or 6 careers in your life, but determining why God put you here in certain roles, particularly related to career, and there's family and there's every other part of your life, to me is the most important. And faith has entered into my life from the time I was a kid. I mean, I kind of grew up with it and kind of wandered away at certain times, back and forth and in and out. But as it relates to career, it's the one situation typically you're spending the most time with. So that's why I believe it's so important to align your career with your faith and to really do the introspective work, some of which you'll talk about as it relates to what you do. It's really important to do that work to make sure you're aligned with what you're doing career-wise. Otherwise, and I'm saying this from personal experience and dozens, maybe hundreds of clients, it'll suck the life out of you, and that's not what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so on your journey, and the many steps that led to you becoming this amazing support for people who are into career questioning, where did you feel that you were absolutely expanded and aligned, and were there times that you were not, and what was the difference? How did you how did it feel, and how did you understand that you had to course correct, or you could keep going and you were on the right track? And how can people have a reference for whether they're aligned with their inner compass or not?
Right. I will say this, if you look at my resume, there are a lot of things that are not on my resume. A lot of jobs I had, particularly growing up, I started delivering newspapers at 10 and a half and trying to avoid dogs that wanted to bite me. But the bottom line is I really had 4 different careers. Okay. Starting at, after college.
Yeah.
And at different times I was in tune with what you're just describing. At other times I was not. And that was the key thing, is I wasn't listening to my inner self on more than one occasion. What details maybe come later, but I graduated college with an engineering degree. I worked for General Electric for 2 years in a sales engineer role. Liked the company, liked what I was doing, but I knew that I wanted to be in one of their high tech divisions. They didn't want to let me in. So I said, okay, I'm going to go to grad school. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do in grad school. So I had a double major in MIS is what it was called. I know I'm dating myself, but that's okay. And marketing. And ultimately I had an internship in the IT field, which was just then the PCs were becoming more popular. But I went into brand management at Procter & Gamble. And I did some version of corporate brand management, marketing, and advertising and public relations and promotional development, that kind of stuff for about 20 years. And then I realized that the vortex of the corporate world was just not for me. The longest I ever spent with any corporation was 4 years. And there were several environments that I worked in that I enjoyed, that I was flourishing in, that I got promoted and I was getting raises and I was contributing. And there were several others that I was in. Basically, I would sleep all weekend. And I wasn't paying attention to that in terms of my own reaction to the environment that I was in. So it wasn't so much the work that I was doing, it was who I was doing it with and the environment that it was involved with. But I wasn't savvy enough at that time to really understand. I'm like, I got kids, I got to support a family. My father did this, whatever. I just felt obligated to do what I was doing. And then I had a real health scare back in the mid 90s. I had mono in college, and then I had a recurrence of it. And for about a 2-year period, I had, I would go to work, but I pretty much couldn't do anything else. I had Epstein-Barr. So that was really a wake-up call. That aligned me with, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing here, or what are you not doing that's making you look like this? I feel better now, 20 some years later, than I did then. Okay, I much healthier, more vibrant, energetic, et cetera, et cetera. So I became a consultant in the early 2000s, and it was great because I could do the work that I enjoyed doing, which was marketing, product development. I probably introduced 50 new products or line extensions into the marketplace in different categories through the years. But I wasn't in the middle of the corporate vortex and all the politics that go around with that and all the hierarchy and everything else. I was paid so that I could give my perspective and opinion so that it would move the ball forward and make things better for the organization. And I didn't have to worry as much about who I quote unquote offended or who I might have said something wrong to. And that really was a comforting thing. Then the financial crisis of 2008 hit and the whole world changed. And I was a year and a half without consistent employment. And if I had had Uber or Lyft to drive back then, at least I could have paid some bills. It was really, really a difficult time, wiped me out. Had a couple of short-term corporate positions after that. And then I became a career coach in 2013. So that's kind of like the morph of what I did. It's like really 4 stages.
Okay.
And if you read things currently, the prediction is that millennials these days will not only have 6 different jobs, they'll have 6 different careers in their lifetimes. Yeah. Some of that is due to technology changes. Like if you look at what AI is doing right now versus even 2 years ago, it's incredible. Copywriters are saying, oh no, I'm going to be out of a job. Much like toll collectors were 15, 20 years ago when the automatic toll collecting machines came into place. So
big changes in perspective.
So there's a combination of things. Align with your own purpose or sense of purpose, your own spirituality, and then how does that fit into the marketplace? How can you resolve issues and solve problems that employers or clients may be having? And as long as you're aligned with that and intuitively you feel good about what it is you're doing, you're going to win. And so are the people around you. Yeah. And that's my philosophy is we're all put here for a variety of reasons. Career is the most important or one of the most important. So let's make it work. I
like how you said that, as long as you feel good.
Yeah.
And something that you said that struck me that that I resonate with a lot is like you were on a track and you are not paying attention to the fact that you'd spend the whole weekend sleeping. And then later on, you ended up having a health issues, and saying that it wasn't the task so much that was the problem, but it was basically the environment and nearly like not the what, but like the how, the condition into which you could deliver the what that were actually the problem. And that's one thing that I see in the work that I do with looking at someone's soul profile. And and I know with someone like you, like I don't know, is it okay to mention that?
Sure, yeah, that's fine. No, go ahead.
Yeah, that when we looked at your soul profile and that it's very much anchored in freedom, being stuck into like a tight corporate environment that's basically cutting your wings in terms of independence, even though you loved what you were doing. So that's the point, because that was the same for me as well. And I find that sometimes people might tend to want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Is like, okay, this career is not, like it's killing me, it's not, it's draining me. But actually it's not necessarily what someone is doing that is the problem, but like is the condition into which they're doing it. And so maybe it's just a simple change of, like you did, you went from employment to being a consultant, gives you more freedom. Freedom is what fuels your soul. So, and that's it, you're back on track. So sometimes it's not always this drastic, like a total 180-degree change that we get to do to feel more aligned. Sometimes it's just, changing, like making these little tweaks.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'll say that it's a gradual revelation of information through the years.
Yeah.
And the first one for me was when I took a Myers-Briggs. I think I was 27, and I was trying to determine whether or not I wanted to continue in a marketing or product management role.
Yeah.
And I worked with a coach, and he gave me the Myers-Briggs, and I came up as an ESFJ. And there were things at the top of that list, like you're more likely to be a coach, a pastor, a social worker, a teacher or professor, and a couple other things. And I looked at him and I said, I've never been any of those things. And I said, what's going on? I said, but I have all this degree and, degrees in technical training and done all this. What's at the bottom of this most likely list? So he had to go back into his files and he pulled it out. And at the bottom it said chemical engineer, civil engineer, programmer, all the things that I had just spent 6 years of my life, time, money, energy, and effort getting credentials for, and it wasn't aligned with me, but I didn't know it. So there are lots of assessments. Like your assessment is terrific because it really goes to the individual. It goes to the soul, as opposed to you having to have to answer a bunch of questions to get to it. Like the DISC and the Myers-Briggs, I really like because they do provide good information. But in terms of what's really going to get you, what you do and a couple exercises that I've developed through the years as well, give you more of a destination that you can point yourself towards, as opposed to just saying, okay, if I take this job, I'm going to be able to put food on the table for the next year or whatever, which is, there are times when that's important and relevant, but other times when you have to say, hey, look, what am I going to say to myself on my hospice bed about how I lived my life and did my career related activities? So, this inner work that you do and that I do in pieces is extremely valuable because it does set your compass toward a much more viable destination. And that doesn't describe the pathway in terms of getting there. That's a whole separate conversation. And I do a lot of that work too. But without knowing the destination, it's like that you and I had this conversation, like I'm in the United States and I have been on the East Coast for years. I could put a boat in the water and let the Gulf Stream take it and the winds take it wherever it might go. Or I could say, I'm going to put this boat in the water and I want to be in Lisbon, Portugal in 3 weeks. That changes my whole approach to how I navigate through the ocean. It changes what I bring as supplies. It changes what I have as a boat. It changes how I direct myself, everything. And that's the thing that I find to be the most inspirational and motivating thing about this work is that when you get somebody who that says, oh, now I see what I want to do and know why, then getting there is a whole lot easier.
I see it as we talk about fulfillment or career fulfillment, like that. Instead of looking at like the outside, it's like, okay, which of these career is gonna bring me fulfillment? Is like, who am I inside, that if I allow myself to express me fully, like I'm gonna fill my career with with myself, with my soul expression, so I'm the one bringing the fulfillment. Now the question is, obviously certain careers are a better terrain for certain types of inner essences.
Yes. And like, as you're saying this, I mean, I've read and heard stories about, Olympic gymnasts that knew at age 6 that's what they wanted to do. Like Martina Navratilova knew she wanted to be a professional tennis player as a young girl. Michael Jackson, obviously, he was, performer with his brothers from the time he was very young. Those are the rare instances when something like a career choice comes very early. For most people, it doesn't happen that way. And again, there's different navigation pathways that you take for that.
Yeah.
My wife happened to be a director of a daycare center for 37 years. She had a couple of jobs out of college and then landed in a daycare center and got promoted. And that's what she did for the rest of her career.
Yeah.
That's not me. I mean, I would never have stayed in one organization for that length of time. That said, it fit her. And that's something in her 20s she discovered. It took me a lot longer to get to that point. And mine changed several times along the way. So again, it's the individual fit and impact that need to be assessed and measured. And the measurement is the toughest thing. The assessment is often easy. It's the measurement that's what's tough. But my daughter's in a situation right now where she kind of wanted to move to a city in Texas, decided to move there, got a job in 24 hours.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be, she's down there 4 years. She's been promoted 4 times. Okay, it turns out to be a really good fit for her. She didn't know that when she first walked in the door. And there's some trial and error that goes along with all of this as well. It's not just going to show up because of an assessment or because of the work that you and I've done. It's like you got to get out there and see what's going to work for you, and that's the important thing.
Mm. So, and actually it's a great segue. So in terms of career choices in general, what do you think is the most important of some of the most important things that people need to either understand, being aware of, or simply remember, as rules of thumbs about career choices?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I focus on with those that I'm working with is, are you going to enjoy what you're doing? Okay. And we do a full assessment before we even get to that of what have your accomplishments been both in career related activities and in life up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when somebody defines what their accomplishments are, 2 things show up. Number one, it allows them to give themselves credit for those things that they've done.
Yeah.
And if you're talking to a recent college graduate, those accomplishments may not be nearly as much as somebody who's 20 years in the workforce. That said, if somebody is an accomplished athlete or musician or performer or something where they can say, yes, I accomplished this and I achieved this, that all counts. Mm-hmm. And then what you do is you go a couple of layers underneath that and say, well, what was it about this circumstance that allowed you to achieve what you did? What was going on mindset wise, what was going on spiritually, what was going on motivationally, and what was going on around you that made this happen. So then when you start to see the consistent patterns or you start to create the patterns, then it's like, okay, how do we find something that looks like this that may not be musical performance, but how do we find something that looks like this for you going forward? And when that part of the conversation, then it's like, oh, I can see why I would be, and I'm making this up, but not by much, why I could be in sales for a company that manufactures musical instruments. Okay, there's a hybrid of skill sets, mindset, and just interests and values that go along with that. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that it's all laid out in my book. That the whole first section of the book is, what do you want to do and why? Who are you and what do you want to do and why?
Yeah.
And then we start going into the how do we communicate it, and how do we get you in front of the right people, and how to interview and negotiate and all that. But until you get the what and the why squared away, it becomes kind of I have to do this exercise as opposed to I want to, I'm choosing to, I'm really, really excited about it, that kind of thing.
Okay, well, so you just mentioned your book, so you can tell us a little bit more so that people know.
Yeah, sure. I absolutely. I have a book and a workbook, and it was originally developed with a colleague, and now I have one that it's really that I use myself, and it's called Finding God's True Purpose for Your Career. And I have an ebook for it. It's a 35-page summary, which actually probably is too long for an ebook, but it does cover pretty much everything. And then a 150-page kind of a complete guide. Yeah. And both of them are in electronic form because if I publish them in a traditional book, I'd have to get copyright approval for so many memes and photos and quotes and everything else that I didn't. Okay. I do have a workbook that goes along with it though.
Yeah.
That if you want to use kind of like a diary type of thing, and it's hard to see it there, but these are all the exercises that are mentioned in the main manuscript. And this is really something that you can use, not just for this particular job search, but you can refer back to it anytime you want and say, hey, at this point in my life, when I was in 2023 looking for my next career option, I really went, full bore. I really put my thoughts and my mind and my emotions into what it is that I want to be doing. And there are 25 exercises in here, and they're connected to a bunch of videos that give you a little more context about how to do it. So it's a pretty comprehensive program. The workbook is in print. The textbook, if you want to call it that, I have found is better as a PDF, and everybody reads stuff online now anyway, or on their screen. So.
But is it a replacement for working with a coach, or is it what you're using to support, or people use that to support their journey working with you?
Yeah, I have found it's much better when people are working with me, and I'm not saying that because it's me. Okay, what happens is this, and this is also part of the first section of the book is, if somebody decides to work with me and they're making $100,000 a year, that's $2,000 a week.
Yeah.
Now there are some DIY people out there who can build their own bathrooms and kitchens and stuff like that. I'm not one of those guys. And I delegate those kinds of things. It's like, look, I'll work alongside you, but I'm not doing it myself.
Yeah.
And I find this to be similar, because for every week that you are quote unquote not employed or not earning income at $100,000 a year, that's $2,000 a week, $400 a day. So if a career coach can steer you in the right direction and save you a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks even, in your own search, it pays out purely from an investment standpoint. And the big thing that I do is I kind of describe myself like one of two things. One is like a Sherpa going up the mountain, and the other one is like a whitewater rafting guide. And I'll use the whitewater rafting illusion here for a moment. It's like, you want to know how to avoid the rocks. That's the biggest thing, because you don't want to crash. Yeah. And the other thing you don't want to do is get involved in an eddy current that's off to the side and you can't get out of it. And that if you're doing it by yourself, it's so easy to just get stuck in your own little world. And I've done enough coaching, both in sports and careers and leadership and everything else, that I know how to pull people out of those eddy currents very quickly. Okay. Because
can you give us some examples of what could be the rocks and the currents? Like,
well, yeah, I'll give you the rocks, as in, let's put it this way. I probably met 100,000 people in the last 10 years, most of them pre-COVID. I did 350 job fairs, primarily in the Northeast part of the US, but I did them in other states as well. And probably a quarter of the resumes I saw, I wouldn't send a high school kid out with, because, and here's why. Number one, sometimes the format and layout was so juvenile, it would just immediately get thrown in the trash, either whether you saw it on paper or on a computer screen. But the real thing is, it wouldn't tell the story about how you could add value to a future organization. People want to know about your accomplishments. What did you do to contribute, and where did you add value? Most people on their resumes have some version of duties, responsibilities, and activities, and nobody cares about that. It's like, you could put breathed oxygen, use the restroom for duties, responsibilities, and activities. But what did you do to impact the business? How did you grow revenue? How did you cut costs? How did you solve big problems, or how did you prevent big problems? Or how did you assemble teams to do all the four above? All right, so the thing that I'm focusing on right now is how to communicate your value proposition, both in a resume and a LinkedIn profile and any other online or cover letter related materials. That's kind of the marketing phase of job search. And that doesn't happen until, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. It's funny because it's like the what and the how.
Yeah.
It's like just describing the what doesn't give much, so like you're basically, you're going underneath the obvious.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I mean, if you have somebody with a resume that says VP of marketing for a Fortune 500 company, you know that person has done some things. They didn't just show up in that role, okay? But you still have to create a resume and a LinkedIn profile that support what it is that you say you want to be doing, and demonstrate what kind of value you've added to the organizations. Because ultimately you're an investment. You know, you're making 100, 200, 300K a year. You're expected to return 3 to 5 times your expense in terms of value to the company. Otherwise, the investment isn't worth it. And that's how you have to look at look at it from the employer side or from the client side. What impact are you having? So it's, you know, what I found is that people focus on what as opposed to how much or what impact. And that's something that I'm able to do. So that's one of the rocks. Another one of the rocks is, you know, not being able to interview properly. You could have all of your credentials look wonderful and have a great, you know, website and social media and whatever else, but you walk in and you interview in a way that's not going to be conducive to you getting the job. So that's another set of rocks. The third one is, you know, during the outreach phase of job search, how do you connect and interact with people that you're quote unquote networking with, often who have no idea who you are? You may have had a referral that introduced you or that kind of thing. How do you make those conversations go in the most productive way, not just for you, but for the other people that you'd be interacting with? So those are the rocks. The eddy currents happen in the following way. And I've experienced this personally too. And I say this to my clients on a regular basis, particularly at job fairs. How many of you have been downsized, right-sized, reorged, let go, fired, or otherwise separated from your organization for reasons that you don't clearly understand? And ultimately, people, okay, happen. And I say this, and I can kind of say it with a smile on my face now, but as I was going through it, it was no smiling matter at all. All of those have happened to me, some of them many more times than once. And it's no fun, okay, when you're going through that. So the goal is to get through the stages of grief associated with a loss in your life. And you know, the number one on the psychologist scale of impact is, you know, death of a spouse. But loss of a job is only number 3. Okay, so it's up there. Yeah. And how do you stay out of the eddy currents and say, hey, look, they may have let me go, but I'm still very valuable. And then how do I feel that, not just from a confident standpoint, but from a I'm ready to communicate it standpoint, and then express that to somebody else who could clearly need your skills and your ability to do the things that they need. So that's an eddy current. The other time is this. I might have had clients who've gone through this, 3 interviews in a week, and they find out the following week that none of them are going to get to the next phase. Yeah. And what do you tell somebody? You know, it's like there's like all the expectations and all the emotions that go along with the excitement of interviewing, and hey, these are great companies, and none of them work out. And it's easy to intellectualize it and say, well, every no is just one step closer to yes. You know, I mean, it's easy to say that, but it's not easy to feel it. Yeah. So one of the things I do with people is say, listen, I play golf, and every once in a while I hit one in the woods. I give myself 3 seconds to get annoyed, to get really pissed off. Damn it. Okay. Because I don't want it to affect the rest of my round. I don't want it to, am I a horrible golfer? No. Did I hit a bad golf shot? Yes. Okay. But that doesn't make me a horrible golfer. I say, okay, here's one that I littered into the woods. Let's play on. Yeah. Okay. And that's the same way you have to look at job search, to me. Because the longer you stay in quote unquote mourning is the less time you have to be out there in front of people saying what it is that you can do to bring value to their organization and bring value to yourself as well.
Yeah, and like I know we've talked about it many times, but like the mindset, and it's important for obvious reasons, but even when we're looking at it from the spiritual perspective, on a, you know, in its widest kind of definition, like we let ourselves be drained, or like let the mood go down because of one setback, or vibrations go down, and then this is like how we feel is what broadcasts our energy out to the world.
That's right.
We can't possibly attract, and we're only going to attract, like, you know, or match possibilities that are, like, you know, a match for our vibrational state. So like letting ourselves get, you know, knocked down, and then we're limiting the possibilities of what's going to come our way in terms of possibilities and opportunities.
Right.
So yeah, so it's like, I mean, it's, you know, nearly physics explains these things. It's not just, you know, like woohoo and yeah, we're energy in a sea of energy. So like we can't afford to let ourselves stay down for too long if we want to attract what we, you know, ultimately what fits our potential.
Right.
Yeah.
With two analogies that I found to be extremely useful in terms of explaining what you're just saying. Number one is, for those of you who still listen to a radio, what's the frequency of the radio station that you're transmitting? And if the frequency that you're transmitting is not what you're looking to receive back, then you're not going to get that back from you. Like when you're on the highway and somebody cuts you off, are you going to get pissed off and then perpetrate that person's energy, not just to yourself, but everybody else around you? Or are you going to say, okay, you cut me off, it happens, you know? Or the other thing is, you know, a boomerang. You know, what you throw out there is going to eventually come back to you, and, you know, all kinds of laws of karmic retribution and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately it comes down to, if your energy's in the right place and your key skills are in the right place and your timing is good. I mean, sometimes the timing can be better than others. Job market fluctuations can change radically, even in a few months. You know, witness what happened in March of 2020, you know, related to COVID. If all of those are in alignment, you're going to succeed. You're going to succeed. And there are always ups and downs. There are hills and valleys in every venture that you go into. But I always say to the people that I'm working with, it's like, look, we know what the destination is. You're comfortable with the destination. Now it's just a matter of making sure that we find the organization or the client related situation that fits you and that destination. And I often compare it to, you know, finding a spouse. I mean, or a life partner. You know what you're looking for and why. You know who you are. How is that compatibility going to work in that situation? And there are a lot of people I've known, and myself included, at different times in my life, who were more married to the job than than I might have been to, you know, my family. And sometimes that happens, and you have to work through that. But it's a very similar dynamic in terms of, how do you make yourself not just available, but accessible and attractive to that situation that you're really looking for.
Yeah. And like something you said makes me think as well, something that we sometimes overlook because we tend to compartmentalize. Can we say that? You know, it's like, okay, like I'm on a job search, so like, you know, like job, so I get, you know, keep my mindset, etc. But like, what happens, like, you know, like the circumstances in our personal life, like life is not separate in different boxes. So whatever, like, especially if, like, for people who are into a transition, like paying attention to like the environment, you know, in personal life, you know, are they like fulfilled, you know, like with family and friends, and because that is can impact the inner state, that's gonna impact also like the success of the career transition, and vice versa. But like we often see like how the job can impacts negatively possibly family life, but like it goes both ways. Sometimes I find we not necessarily think about it so much on the other way around.
Well, you're 100% right. I mean, one of the exercises in my book it's called Next Steps in Life.
Yeah.
And I outlined 14 different areas of your life that you want to, quote unquote, either achieve or experience things between now and when you get into a hospice bed or get hit by a bus, whatever happens to you. Okay.
You have the option to choose.
Yeah, right. You know, not to be morbid, but when you look at your life as number of days, you know, my mother passed away in December of 19. She lived 32,213 days. Okay. I'm at 23,000 something. So I consistently ask myself, what am I going to accomplish, achieve, or experience with my life between now and where she was at age 88? And if you look at your life as a series of days and not years, which come and go, everybody knows what 24 hours is. And the reason I'm even bringing this up is because life is always going to win. I mean, I've had client situations. I worked with a guy a couple of months ago who's 82 years old, and he had a very successful career as a recruiter he was in sales for a long time and then recruiting for 21 years. And he took some time off because his wife was having a cancer situation. He actually left his former job. And he decided he wanted to get back to work because he was getting bored. She was better. And frankly, they didn't want to be spending all day in the house with each other. Okay. So 82 years old, the guy is back at it.
Wow.
But, and I say, but life won in the sense of he wanted to take care of his wife as she was going through her medical trials. And he decided to quit his job so he could do that. Many clients that I've worked with have been caretakers of adult parents. One guy that I worked with decided that he would be a full-time caretaker of his mother, thought she would last a year, and she lasted 5. So he had a 5-year gap in his resume. And it took him 6 months to find a new position, even though he'd been very accomplished retail store manager for a number of years. People just didn't buy it. But the bottom line is, ultimately, when he's in his hospice bed, he's going to look back and say, hey, I took care of my mother, and I'll never regret that. Yeah. So life is going to win. I mean, if you're going through a divorce, if you're, having childcare issues, if you're having all kinds of stuff, those are always going to influence what's going on in the workplace, or for, individually for you in the workplace. And there's an ability to compartmentalize, as in, if something's really going wrong, okay, it may show up, you need to be cognizant of it. But it's like the professional athlete whose father dies, and I've seen this several times, and he'll get on and the guy will have a great game, and he'll get on and say, how did you play this game with your father just passed away yesterday? Because I know that's what my father would have wanted me to do, and I did this in his honor. That kind of thing. So life issues can also support what you're doing career-wise, depending on how your mindset interprets them.
Yeah. Depending how the mindset interprets. Yeah. It's like how we think influences how we feel, and vice versa. And we can either get onto a upwards or downward spiral very fast.
That's correct. Yes. And that's correct. And that's one of the things I was talking about, like the stages of grief. You want to minimize those as much as possible. In 9.5 years of doing this work, I've had 2 people call me and say something that sounds like this: I just got fired. They let me go. 2 people in all that time, because they wanted to. They didn't want to be there anymore, but they didn't step up and say, "Look, I'm leaving." But everybody else that I've ever worked with is like, "Oh, I got let go. I got fired. I can't believe." And look, it's understandable. It's totally understandable. It's your identity. At least for me, it was. The first time it happened to me was my early 30s. And I was devastated. It took me several months to recover, and not even recover, several months to say, I want to get back in and do something about it. And ultimately I did, obviously, but the goal that I have with anybody I'm working with is to get to the bottom of what it is that they experienced and why. What did they learn from it? Importantly, that's one of the most important things. What did you learn from it? And was it something that might have been completely out of your control? I mean, if half your department gets laid off, it's a coin flip as to whether it was you or somebody else. And there's probably something in your near-term future that may be way better than what it is that you were at before. And I don't try to be Pollyanna-ish about it, like say, oh, it'll be okay. That's not where I'm coming from. But I do believe things happen for a reason, and it's up to us to make the best of what those circumstances are and turn it into the best possible outcomes that we can.
Yeah, and actually you mentioned your mother earlier, and only if you're okay to talk about it, because I thought that she's like such a role model or amazing example of beating the odds, and like what mindset can turn around difficult circumstances.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. She was born with spina bifida in the early 30s. And this is where I believe God had a huge hand in a lot of this, because I wouldn't be here for 2 reasons that I'll tell you one first, and I can tell you another one later. But she was born with a tomato-sized growth at the bottom of her spine outside the skin with fluid in it. And there was one pediatric neurosurgeon in the world who had the credentials to do the surgeries that she needed. And he lived about 30 miles from Boston, Massachusetts, to the north.
Yeah.
And she lived about 25 miles to the west. So at 2 days old, my grandparents took her in a 1920-something Ford without a car seat, without a baby seat, to Shriners Hospital in Boston. And she was there for several months. I don't know how long she was there. She saw this doctor until she was 12. And when she was 12, she was wearing leg braces. I've seen pictures. And she was told then that she would never walk without leg braces. One leg was 1.5 inches shorter than the other, or have kids, because they thought all of her reproductive capabilities were compromised based on all the surgeries they had done. Well, I'm the oldest of 6, okay? And into her 70s, and I remember this phone call. She was a huge baseball fan. It's how I learned baseball as a kid, and I played through high school and college and semi-pro and a bunch of things. She could never play herself, but she loved the game. She'd call me up and say, hey, listen, the Red Sox are playing in Baltimore on September 8th, whatever the date was. Get some tickets. I'm taking the plane with Catherine, my oldest niece. And she's in a wheelchair, but she didn't let it bother her. She didn't let it slow her down. And when I wrote her eulogy poem a few years before she passed, and I shared it with her, and she looked at me and she said, you know, I didn't know I was this good. And I said, Ma, your normal is different than anybody that I know, but you don't let it stop you. And that by itself is a huge example, not just for your kids, but anybody that knows you. Yeah. Because you went to work, you know, after you had 6 kids, you went back to work and worked for another 20 years. You know, like, look, you didn't let life stop you or your physical condition stop you. Yeah. And I look at it and I say, if somebody can get through life like that, and I've seen the guy, I can't remember his name, that does motivational speeches. He has no arms and partial legs. You know, there's a guy with no arms that plays guitar with his toes, and it's unbelievable, you know, what people can actually do when their mind says, yes, I can do it. So I don't try to minimize what it is that somebody's going through in terms of job search, in terms of losing a job or whatever, but I say, hey, look, if these people can get through what their obstacles are and their hurdles and their brick walls, so can you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Bill, I wanted to touch on, you know, like what's the, you know, like in the current circumstances that we're in, you know, globally, and like the current economy, what have you noticed, you know, in the with your clients and in, you know, like the job market? What's your take on how is our current circumstances affecting like career transitions, like career choices, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, you know,
some insights for us.
A couple things. Number one, difficult times are always opportunities.
Okay.
And there have been some of the greatest transitional achievements that mankind has ever put together during difficult times, you know, during difficult economic times, or difficult, you know, World War II, for instance, you know, when the whole world was involved with it at one level or another. So a couple things. Number one, depending on what field you're in, it could be a huge boom or it could be a bust.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I had had Zoom stock in February of 2020. Okay. I wish.
Yes.
Well, you know, and a good friend of mine who's with a private equity firm on the West Coast, one of his first assignments in the mid or late 90s, whenever he showed up, was he presented to his senior management team a case for investing heavily in a startup company called Google. Okay, so you know, we're in a time right now where technology allows us to have so many more opportunities than we might have had even 10 years ago, or certainly 30, 40, 50 years ago, that we need to be aware of what those opportunities can become, that ideas can become reality much more quickly. Yeah. The second thing is that what I've found in terms of, let's say, job skills, is it's kind of like real estate. In 9 years of doing job fairs, I met one web developer, one, because there's too much work for those people to do. The supply and demand is totally in the favor of the employee versus the employer. You know, if you have those technical skills that are in high demand, and certainly there are other fields that have that, you know, certain parts of healthcare, you know, certain parts of any technology development, any web app developer right now, all of those areas, it's like real estate. It's like location, location, location. If you're in the right location, it almost doesn't matter what property you have. Like I've seen people with horrible resumes get great jobs because they're in such high demand that as long as they can communicate something about themselves, they'll get a chance and they get started. So I'm saying two things. One is recognizing what opportunities may exist in terms of your functional areas of expertise, or you may want to have some additional training and expertise developed, like use the time that you may have between jobs to get some additional credentials. I'm working with a guy now, this is the second time we've worked together, who has an incredibly powerful long career in TV, radio, and video production. He had his own business for almost 20 years, and then he just got tired of running the business and then sold it. But he's now in a situation where he's, you know, close to my age, and the quote unquote younger folks in that area aren't really wanting to hire him. So he's going back to get some additional credentials that will allow him to add to his experience and make things work. Okay, so I'm not discounting that we're in a huge state of flux, both from a domestic economy in the US and a world economy. I'm not ignoring that, but I am saying that there are more opportunities that are created in times like this than people are often willing to allow themselves to believe. All right. The other part of this is, have you been in a role that you really didn't want to be in for a certain period of time, and does moving on from that role open up the doors? Like you talked about me being, you know, my soul map has freedom all over it.
Yeah.
Is that something that you as an individual have as well? And is this like a time to explore things that you've never even considered because you were too busy working? And that's all part of the book too. That whole first section is, okay, what is it that's going to make some sense? So I'm not denying that in certain fields, there are going to be downsizing, there's going to be layoffs, and there's going to be jobs that just never come back. Like a good example, and I've worked with several clients in this arena too, is investments and financial services. All of that's been automated. You know, like 20 years ago, there were teams of people from an operational standpoint that had to do, you know, function A, B, C, D both for the internal people and external clients. So much of that has been automated that those jobs don't exist anymore. So then you have to recognize, are you selling buggy whips? You know, like
are you selling what?
Buggy whips. Give me a second.
Okay.
Like when
I don't understand the word, so just so you know.
Like, give me a second.
Yeah.
Like horse and carriage.
Oh, okay.
Late 1800s, early 1900s.
Yeah.
The whips that you would use for your horse was an item that sold, okay, because they were necessary in terms of transportation. When the automobile became popular, those weren't as popular. And you have to recognize when you're, you know, when the industry's time is over.
Yeah.
You know,
and they become popular again after 50 Shades of Grey, right? I'm joking.
For a totally different reason too. And I wonder what actual sales became after that movie came out. But anyway, but the reality is like, you know, there are people, like when I first got into the pharmaceutical industry, it was a ripe job, a ripe industry. And then there were a whole bunch of constraints put on the industry. There were things where drug approvals became much, much more tedious. So the money wasn't there.
Yeah.
And drug companies, as you know, around the world, drug companies, biotech companies, nutraceutical companies, et cetera, are combining or merging so that they can still be profitable. And the pharmaceutical industry is no fun anymore to me. Okay. In other words, you know, medical devices maybe, but it's totally changed from what it was 30 years ago. And that's the kind of thing you have to look at and say, okay, what's happening in the greater environment that I find myself in, and then how do I adapt my own skills into either a revised version of that environment or a totally different one. Okay, and I do career switches with people. Probably a third of the people I work with are going through some kind of, not just a career transition in terms of finding another job, but making a real career switch. And for me, that's fun work, because that's when all of the introspective stuff that we've talked about earlier on in this call come up to the surface. That's when people really have to look themselves in the eye and say, what am I put here to do? What I really want to do? And how's that going to translate into what the marketplace needs?
I like what you're saying here. It reminds me of, some with stress and burnout, like sometimes like it takes someone to go to the ultimate stage of full burnout to be able to take that break and look after themselves. So it's really like a little bit of like, it might take, being laid off for, in this weird economy to finally allow ourselves to look at, now that I'm here, now I finally got the opportunity to do the internal work and to really think about what I really want to do. Otherwise, like 10 years down the line, would still be into the exact same position without allowing themselves to maybe figure out what they truly want,
Well, here's another example. And I'm, again, anecdotally, but about 5 years ago, I worked with a woman who was with a major communications company in the accounts payable department for 28 years. She had 3 different positions in the same department, in the same building for 28 years. It would have made me gouge my eyes out. I would have got so bored. That's me. But for her, it was a comfort zone, and she liked her job. She was doing well. By the time they had the layoff at this company, she was way overpaid. I mean, way overpaid. She was driving 45 minutes one way to get there, and she liked the job. She liked the people she was working with. It was all, quote unquote, let's call it a comfort zone, which is all totally fine, but it got blown up. She got a nice severance package. And then ultimately, as we did the inner work about what do you want to do going forward, she realized she liked the work a lot. Ultimately, she found a position that was about 15% less salary-wise, but it was a 10-minute commute. And it was when I took the assignment on, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to help this one. I wasn't sure there was going to be a place for her. But ultimately there was. It took her about 3 months to find the position, but it was way better for several reasons than what she had before. But she had gotten so comfortable with that, she didn't know any better. She didn't have any incentive to look outside and see what else was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great story. And okay, so Bill, so what's like, we are coming towards the end of our time. Like, what's one question that I didn't ask you that would be useful for the people who are going to watch us?
Yeah, I think you kind of asked a whole lot of them that go around this one question. Okay, in other words, we kind of navigated around it. It's what's my purpose? Okay, and in the front of the book, and this is not something I made up. When I found it, I just like my eyes lit up. It was developed somewhere in Japan. I don't know who developed it. It's all over the internet, and it's called Ikigai, Ikigai, and in Sanskrit it means dharma, and in English it roughly means purpose, but it's a stronger meaning than purpose. It's like reason for existence, okay, which is like, whoa, that's a whole lot stronger. And there's a diagram that I really love in terms of its ability to communicate very quickly what it is that the implications of purpose are all about. And if you go back to high school math or even junior high math, it's Venn diagrams where you overlap the circles and all that kind of stuff. Well, this is a Venn diagram with 4 circles, and these are the 4 circles. It's what am I good at? What do I enjoy doing? What can I get paid for? And paid well for is really the better way to say it. And what does the world need? So if you put those 4 circles and then you look at the point where they all intersect, that's the bullseye. If you land in that bullseye, you're going to win and the world is going to win. And that's one of my goals with anybody that I'm working with, is to, again, define what that bullseye is and then manifest it. So that's the only question you didn't ask, but you asked everything around it. So it's not like you didn't ask it. It's just you didn't ask that one.
Yes.
So
yeah. So in relation to the 4, like, to the Ikigai, what are we good at? What are we paid for? What do we enjoy doing? And what the world needs. Where
Right.
would you put, or is it underneath all of this? Where would you put the what's your soul's gifts and qualities, basically your essence?
Wow.
Where
Yeah,
is it?
I think it's the what do you enjoy
Okay.
that aligns with your soul the most. I mean, like if you're asking me any one of those four things, that would be the one that would align most with your soul work. The kind of work that you do and that you shared with me, which was truly an eye opener, by the way. This is a shameless plug for what you do and the value of it, because I didn't have I kind of had an idea of what I saw on the paper, but when you were stating it to me and then showing it to me, I was like, wow, I didn't realize it was that prominent. Okay, so what do you enjoy is probably the thing that I would pay attention to the most. The other thing is, what are you good at? Because those are the two internal things. The two external things are, what can you get paid for, or what is somebody going to pay you for it, and what does the world need? Okay, those are outside you. The inside you are the two that I just mentioned.
Yeah. Awesome. So Bill, I think it's a good time to to mention that, and we didn't even talk about this before the interview, that we are actually partnering like together.
Yeah.
In a sense that like you're like extremely like your superpowers in extracting what people are good at and putting it on paper, on resumes and LinkedIn profiles, and your how to conduct interviews, etc. So, which is not my forte. Like you're like, and I'm more into like the stress management, getting your mindset, figuring out what your soul wants and the gifts and qualities. So bringing all of this. So like, I'm actually super excited that, for the people who are, like wanting to have an experience of starting with what their soul wants, but really going all the way down to landing a job that is, that aligns with it. Like we are like, we are partnering up to support people in achieving that. So I'm super excited about, what's ahead of us with that.
Yeah, same here. And just to put some context around it, this is my interpretation, but you do the inner work or the inner assessment with an eye toward what the outer work is.
Yeah.
I do the outer work with an eye toward what the inner work has been. In other words, I can't really communicate the manifestation of what somebody's looking for until the inner work is done or is clear. And there are some clients that I meet with right away. They know exactly what they want to do. Hey, listen, I've been doing this for 15 years. I love the work. We had a downsize in my company. Let's make it work. Let's make it happen. I haven't had a resume done. Okay, great. Okay, so they already are, and that's a great place to start. But that's like 40% down the pathway that you and I are talking about. The first 20-30% is the work that you do. I do some of that, but not in the same way that you do. And then from there, it's like, okay, where do we take this so that it becomes something you get paid for and something the world needs, and then we go from there.
Yeah, I love it. And like just the way you expressed it is like, to me, it's like, your superpower is like taking, like a heap of information and summarizing it, putting it into the right words that hit the target, like, so that's great. And so Bill, I know that you have, in terms of how we can like give a little bit more to our people right now, you're gonna make available your PDF for people to download. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm gonna make available the ebook,
yes,
which is 38 pages.
Okay.
And the title of the ebook and the full PDF book are the same, but one is much shorter than the other, much more. It's a good outline, but again, one of the things that I say in both books is the advantage and the power of working with a qualified career coach. And I'm not saying just me. I'm just saying with somebody who knows what to do to navigate you through the waters of job search. So yes, I'm making the ebook available. my website is careerswithcoachbill.com.
Yeah.
And that way you can, get onto our email list and get any updates. If you want the ebook directly, you can just send me an email, from this, and just mention your name, so I'll know where it's coming from. And
but what I'll do, Bill, is like we are figuring out, something that people just click a link and get.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. We'll do it that way then. Yeah, that's fine.
Because I'm going to remind everyone of your, all of your contacts, of course. And on my end, what I'll do, for any of the people following you, is I have a masterclass on your career is your karma.
I see.
Interesting. And I hosted the Career and Spirituality Summit last year, and I'm going to make that available as well. So I run out the how and links, etc., but that's going to be available for everyone as well. Awesome. Bill, thank you so much. As always, always rich and cool conversations. So thank you so much. I hope everyone has enjoyed it, and I shall see you really soon. Thank you.
Bonjour, mon ami. Okay.
Yes.
So anyway, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much, Bill. Thank you.